Hi, Abby.
John, hello. How are you?
It's good to see you.
Did you have a good trip over from the other stream there? Did you run over here?
I did. I ran right over.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. We're so excited to kick off the sessions today with John Wolpert. John, thank you for joining us for this AMA. It looks like everyone's already figuring it out, but you guys can just drop your questions in the chat over there, and John's going to do his best to try and get to them. If he doesn't get to your question, you can also reach out to Baseline at Baseline Proto on Twitter. And John, take it away.
Hey, all right. Well, it's great to see everybody. I'm looking over in the chat, and so Abby, I guess I'm just going to read off some of the chats here. Thanks, Hector. That's very nice to say. So let me read some. I'm interested to hear the feedback. Dane Armstrong says, I'm interested to hear the feedback from large enterprises on the potential of Baseline in oil and gas, et cetera. It's funny you should say that. We had BP on a call earlier this week, and we were hearing all sorts of exciting things about the sorts of issues that come up in workflows between many different companies in the oil and gas and energy sector. And boy, there's a lot of pain there in automating business processes across big companies, little companies, state actors that all have to work in harmony. And right now, a lot of that is done on faxes and PDFs and that sort of thing, where you have big system integrations. You have them between large volume counterparties, and that leaves out as many as 30% of even the largest of companies' counterparties, doing things like purchase orders and invoices, but also pallets and serialization of lots of shipments of things. All of that, you wind up gumming up the works. Even if you spend millions or billions of dollars on your IT systems, if they can only tell you what you think you know and not what your counterparties also know on a record by record basis, then you're in trouble. You basically need to spend another $1 billion for that. So hopefully the Baseline protocol is one standard technique that lots of different systems can use. It can integrate into themselves to make that B2B process automation more inclusive and more fluid. And yeah, oil and gas and energy sector is a big subject matter, and it's nice to have BP on the team, the Baseline team. What else have we got here? Call me out if I don't answer your question well. I'm happy to revisit. I'd like to understand the Coca-Cola supply chain being baselined. So I want to be careful to say that it's Coke One North America. That's the bottlers group. Coca-Cola, the brand, is a different entity, as I understand it. And I'm not directly involved in it. I should probably introduce myself. I'm John Wolpert. I'm the TSC, the Technical Steering Committee Chair for the Baseline Protocol. Baseline-protocol.org is the place to go. Come on in. The water's warm, and we are a very welcoming group of about now over 600, approaching 700 individuals and companies that are working on a standard technique for using blockchain as an ordering and hash management instrument, as a always-on, tamper-resistant piece of middleware that can help traditional systems of record work together without having to set up a new integration bus for every new partner and every new group or consortium or whatever you'd like to call it. It preserves compartmentalization of information. That is, you and I have a purchase order. It's kind of important that my competitor doesn't find out about the fact that you're purchasing from me. And so that's compartmentalization, but it might be that my competitor is also a shipper and I have to use them to ship my product to you. So how can we compartmentalize that information, but also have a full high integrity workflow where lots of different participants are aware of and know about their particular work step, but may have no awareness of somebody else's work step. And yet everybody is confident that the workflow has integrity. That's the kind of the baseline of baseline. And to do that, I always say this: Baseline is not a chain, a token, a scheme, a product, a platform. It is a technique, and it is being built in or developed in the OASIS standards body. OASIS being a venerable standards organization behind SGML, SAML, AMQP, MQTT, all of these just deep systems that run the internet and other things. And so that's what Baseline is all about. Having said that, let me go on to some more questions. So yeah, in terms of Coke One North America, Kona, a company called Provide and a company called Unibright are very strongly behind that, and it's their deal. I wouldn't want to speak for them too much. I mean, what I thought was really cool about what happened with Coke One North America was that they began the project out in the open. This is an open source, open standards project, Baseline itself, and they decided to do their solution out in the open from day one. I don't see that happen a lot. I thought it was very courageous. I thought it was very visionary and smart. And to have all those different CIOs from the bottlers, this is old school, salt of the earth, must work systems IT people, and who are focused on security and performance and doing what you say and saying what you do. And for them to come out and do a project out in the open like this, I was blown away. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. The details of the project, I'm afraid, even if I knew what they were, it probably wouldn't be appropriate for me to discuss it. It's not my project. We did Baseline integration with Chainlink. So yeah, Chainlink has several Chainlink core people have written, and I think they're about to break it, a really cool set of use cases that they want to get Chainlink engineers around the world to get working on. And I'm quite excited about this. I'm hoping they'll break it maybe as early as next week. And there's as you all know, Chainlink is quite involved with Google, and so there's one that has a BigQuery in the use case. I think that would be pretty cool to see a Chainlink Google mashup using the Baseline technique. So Chainlink, just like a bunch of other companies or organizations and communities, are simply saying, hey, wait a minute, Chainlink, Baseline is useful for me, and I can be useful for baselining. In Chainlink's case specifically, it's all about non-determinism, right? So if you have a system like Baseline contemplates, where not only do you have blockchains, which have to maintain, where you have to deal with non-determinism, being, I have a piece of data. If I read that data, and there are 6,000 or 7,000 nodes that all have to, if all those nodes went out, I wrote a line of code that said, go read this piece of data, go get the time, go check your clock and put the time into this parameter and then run the function. And then 6,000 nodes ran exactly that same line of code, because that's how blockchain works. You'd have a big mess, right? Because every one of those nodes would have gotten a slightly different time reading if they all went and checked it. Hence, you need an oracle, and that is, sort of kind of puts a pause on that process of all the different nodes going in and making that reading, and says, no, we're going to have one authoritative reading. That's what's going to get injected into the function. And I know that's a really wonky way of describing what is a pretty exciting thing, but it's, that's kind of what I do, make things boring. So boring is the new exciting, I think, is what we've been saying. So if you think of Chainlink that way, baselining is even more intensive that way, because now you have these traditional systems of record that are also running code. There's functions that are saying, hey, we agree that this master service agreement will have this discount rate table, and this purchase order now needs to calculate against that rate table, and say that that purchase order, maybe there's a variable like the temperature was, if the temperature in a shipping container went over a particular degree, then the purchase order would actually have to calculate against a different rate because the agreement might have been that if the temperature went over a certain level, then I'm going to pay you less because the goods might be spoiled. Well, you got to get that piece of exogenous data into the function, and you have all the different counterparties that are going to run that function off-chain and some on-chain stuff going on. So Chainlink becomes really important for that. I hope that makes some sense, and I hope I haven't bored you all to sleep, but it's a really essential function. It's boring. I don't think we'll have a marketing department about this sort of thing in 10 years, but a lot of the good stuff in the internet is boring but essential, and that's what we're trying to do with blockchain is become important, useful, and boring enough for good CIOs, CISOs, and CTOs to say, oh yeah, of course we're going to use that. Who wouldn't use that? Let's see, I'm looking at, okay, the advent of virtual economies through things like Second Life and Fortnite. Oh, yeah, awesome. I haven't thought of a Second Life in a while. How do you think of the blockchain may allow this space to develop further? Gosh, I don't know. Again, I'll tell you what I wouldn't use the blockchain for in these things is the back end for anything, right? Blockchains are fundamentally and by nature, and the laws of physics will say that anything with a consensus algorithm behind it is going to be less performant than the thing that doesn't have a consensus algorithm. So you're not going to want to run don't think of blockchains as databases. It's just rule number one. I helped make a pretty big blockchain as a database thing called Hyperledger Fabric, and took a look at that and went, wow, I think DB2 and Oracle probably kind of do what we were doing there just fine, and maybe didn't need to do that. But we learned a lot, right? There was really good work in there. But I think the thing I came away with was, don't think of public or private blockchains or permissioned blockchains as shared databases because they're not good at compartmentalization and they're not performant, and they never will be. It's just not the pattern you want to use. And we worked really hard to get compartmentalization to work in a blockchain. And it becomes a very complicated mess of decisions that you have to make to get this pattern that doesn't want to compartmentalize things to do so, and also to make it fast. It's just not good at fast. That's why Baseline's whole case is predicated on the idea that let's use the blockchain in such a way that we don't have to make it go fast, because it's not going to go fast. Not as fast as we could make other things go, at least. So, you put the blockchain at least 2 steps away from the coalface of your application. So you have a database to run your data. You have SaaS and clouds and blah, 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 because that's really going to be performant. And you're running your game. You don't need to run that on a blockchain. Where you want the blockchain is, again, ordering and hash management. You want to be able to say, well, this system and that other system need to, for some reason, be in a state of consistency. Now, I can't think why I would need my Candy Crush game and my Guild Wars game to be rendered in a state of consistency. That doesn't seem like something that would work. But I never cease to be amazed by the gaming community's inventiveness, and now they have this new toolkit called the blockchain to do new things. I suspect it'll be the new games working with other new games that makes something interesting. I think the existing games and their economies, I'm a big fan of Eve Online, and they have a whole economist dedicated to the economics of the Eve Online system. And I doubt that they're going to want to be able to trade their in-game currency for Candy Crush currency, but we'll see. Is Chainlink DeFi? I don't know. I'm not really a DeFi guy. Everybody I know is really into finance. I got to be in finance. I mean, I know the principles, but I figure with all these other fantastic finance guys, people all over the place. We were just talking to the Cadena folks, and they come out of JP Morgan. They know their business. We have a consensus and Codify. People like Lex Solikin is just, I mean, the dude is amazing. Knows a ton. It has a great column on finance and DeFi and FinTech. And I'm really impressed with all those guys. And because sometimes when I see a lot of talent working on a particular problem, I go, oh, I'm going to go work on a different problem. So I'm the middleware guy. I'm the, hey, let's make, what are the ones and zeros here, and how can we deal with that? And I'll leave the finance questions to them. I also don't ever follow my advice about tokens. I know nothing about investing, and I'm a terrible gambler. So how do you see blockchain supporting sustainability and green efforts for enterprise? Well, I mean, so in terms of supporting sustainability and green, I think that clearly Chainlink going to, or Ethereum going to proof of stake and going to ETH2 will help with the green part. Sustainability, yeah, well, when you increase the efficiency and inclusiveness of supply chains and business processes across many, many different legally separate entities, you wind up greasing the skids for efficiency, and efficiency increases sustainability, and you can get a lot of other neat tricks in there. So hopefully we're on the cusp of this final wave that has been building for 40 years. I mean, we've been able to do a lot of this stuff 40 years ago. We could have integrated a lot more IT with other companies, and we just didn't. Data entry is still a problem. It's amazing how fast we go and how slow we go in different areas, and this is one of them. I've been waiting my whole life for some things that seemed pretty obvious even in the 1980s. So, but sometimes things go slow until they go fast. So maybe we're on the cusp of really having pervasive systems that don't rely on faxes and PDFs and that sort of thing. John doesn't need a virtual wiper. I don't know. Thank you. What kind of database? I'm just reading through here. Jason Renstrap asks, do you think that large institutions fully grasp the future of verifiable on-chain randomness achieved through VRFs, NFTs, etc.? I think large institutions, large groups of mostly humans in general, people, there's an old saying, there aren't any stupid people. There are just people busy trying to be smart about something other than what you want to tell them about. And so I remember briefing the CEO of a pretty big company on blockchain, and they ran 400,000 people and knew more about doing that than I did. But yeah, I came away from the meeting going, wow, they sure don't know about blockchain. That was not a stupid person. That was a really smart person who was busy thinking about other things. And I think that's the key, is really getting into that conversation and making sure that we're relevant to what they worry about. And they worry about security. They worry about compartmentalization. The bad day for a CISO is when the data gets breached, not about tampering. Tampering is important, but data breaches are more important to those guys. So that's why telling them, hey, let's put this data on a new threat surface with lots and lots of other system admins who you don't control, and let's let's do that with your internal corporate data. Yeah, no, they're not into that, right? So they've been doing the passive no for 5 years on that subject, and baseline protocol is in particular an approach that says, hey, we get that, we're hearing you. Let's not do that. Let's use blockchain in a different way, maybe a more boring way, but more essential way that makes sense, that you aren't going to lose your mind thinking about. AB Abundo asks, may I ask about the current state of IBM blockchain, wondering if there's an integration of real life cases with the IBM blockchain. So IBM blockchain, in as many weeks, I've heard of 3 new projects that involve Hyperledger Fabric, either the IBM blockchain version of it or somebody else's, where they want to baseline Fabric with SAP and Oracle and Dynamics and other kinds of systems, spreadsheets and QuickBooks and that sort of thing. And yeah, so that's what Baseline doesn't care what kind of state machine works with what other kind of state machine. That's the whole point. And blockchains are state machines, just like a database is. So you can use Baseline for DB2 and Oracle and Mongo, or Neo4j, which, by the way, shameless plug. I love. They don't pay me, and I don't have any stock in them, but I really am excited about Neo4j as a graph database. Or you could use Ethereum and Fabric and Corda. Although really Corda, I think, is better used in the Baseline case as a messaging layer. And I'm kind of excited to see a couple of people talking about doing a reference implementation of Baseline where Corda is used in that role, because it's actually pretty good at that particular thing. I don't know that I would call Corda a blockchain, and I know that Corda people themselves back in the day used to say that Corda is not a blockchain, and I would agree with them. It's a good messaging layer, though. How involved is Chainlink in the Unibright Coca-Cola supply chain? I don't know that Chainlink is, but obviously, in cases where things like the Coca-Cola Coke One North America project require an Oracle-style data source, why wouldn't you use Chainlink? I mean, I don't know that's who I'd use. So who they use, I don't know. What am I personally most excited? Fraser Higginson asks, what are you personally most excited in this space? Do you think it's happening tonight? I don't know what's happening tonight, but I guess what I'm excited about is, boring is the new exciting. I'm excited about how we're getting past this age of hyperbole and hype that I had some hand in causing in the enterprise side of it, at least in 2015. And now we're getting to, of course, let's use it. That's an obvious use of that tool. Let's use that tool. Pick it up off the workbench. Nothing to see here. When I was in my first job at IBM in 1997, when I was working on the Java team, and that was the height of the Java hype. We had 30,000 people, if I recall correctly, had to run the Java 1 conference, the second or third one, at the Javits Center in New York City, because it had outgrown every other venue. And I keep on wondering when I'm going to see a 30,000 person event for blockchain in general. I haven't seen one of those yet. So Java became huge really fast. And we had a whole Java marketing teams and Java developer relations and all these sorts of things. And now you just use it. It's just Java. It's like you don't have a C++ marketing team. You just use it. Same thing I think will happen with blockchain. And that's okay. That's the way it's supposed to be. The scouts find the gold in the hills, and then the pioneers show up, and then the settlers, and then society and civilization move on from there. I think you come from a business. Bob Arnold asks, I think you come from a business background. Many people foresee adoption issues with the smart contract language being understood by business leaders. How do you foresee developers communicating smart contract code effectively to business leaders? That's a really good question. So obviously, developers explaining code to business people and business people explaining requirements to developers is a problem for time immemorial. Certainly precedes my 54 years. But it is, I subscribe to a school of thought that is not easy, but I like it. And that is, every line of code is a business decision, and every business decision that doesn't understand the code is probably a bad one. And I think if product managers in particular subscribe to that and just stay curious about the code. I know there's all this stuff about no code and low code, and that's all wonderful. I've been to that movie before. I mean, we were trying that in the 90s as well, and maybe this time around it'll be even bigger. I do remember a thing called Lotus Notes, where we wrote, business people wrote a lot of terrible applications that got stuck into enterprises and took years to get out. So hopefully we won't do it that way again. But whether it's code or low code or no code, it's all about logic. It's all about thinking projects through. And from that perspective, I think and it's more important that business people understand what an oracle is and why it's important, and understand that, the basics of things like non-determinism, so that they understand why, beyond some marketing hype, why they should want to use something like Chainlink. And that's what is underpins, and this will be my last point. I think Abby's probably pulling me off the stage here. That's what underpins the baseline protocol relationship with Chainlink. It's just a technical issue. It's not marketing. It's not hypey. It's simply, we need a way of solving non-determinism for data inputs, and why would you not use this one? That's as far as it goes. Simple. I like simple.
Don't we all? Thank you so much, John. And if you want to keep taking a few, you're more than welcome. But just wanted to thank you so much for taking the time to do the AMA today. We really appreciate it. Tons of questions, a ton. So everybody, you know where to find John on Twitter. I know Baseline Proto is your Baseline Twitter. What's your Twitter, John?
My Twitter is just J Wolpert just at J Wolpert. Awesome. And Abby, give me the rules here. I mean, can I stay?
Yeah, you're more than welcome to stay and take some more if you'd like. I just wanted to thank you. So thanks so much.
I just didn't want to take up for the next.
No, go for it. There's a ton of great questions in there, so please feel free to continue for a bit, as long as you're ready. Thank you.
All right. Well, for anybody that does need to drop off, baseline-protocol.org. Please come, and you can catch me on the Slack. I tend to use Slack more than Discord or Telegram. We do have a connector so that if I'm watching Slack, I'm also seeing the Telegram items. But then it's just easier. You can DM me on the Slack channel, and you can get that inviter right on baseline protocol.org, baseline-protocol.org, and there's an inviter for that. The GitHub repo is right there. I hope there's lots of engineers out there that would like to throw in and help with. I mean, heck, maybe there's somebody out there right now that can become a maintainer, and help really define the future of what baseline work goes, where it goes. I'll tell you the story of a guy named Kyle Thomas. He's got like a 3-person company, and he is just blowing up. Everybody wants to know about Kyle. He just wrote all that, and run in plenty of ways for people to do that, where you can just really make a name. I always like to see these moments in technical development history where the underdogs can become get right on top of that hill and ride it up. And that's what Kyle did. And there's still room. There's also a fantastic person named Anise Frank, who has decided to step up and make it her mission life to make sure that the standard is built correctly. And she's a legit engineer. So the more the merrier right now. Come on in and make a name. I'll take a few more questions. Let's call it 10 minutes. The advent of the virtual economies through things like I think we had that one before. Well, it's hard to do these. Read the thing and ask me anything. John Johnson says, when do you think enterprises will start moving away from proof of concepts and start using public blockchains with live projects? Well, I think that if you think of blockchain as a database and you use it that way, as an enterprise or anybody else, you're going to be in toyland. You're going to be in building cute things that don't scale, because blockchains as databases don't scale. They just don't. Law of physics just doesn't work. But if you use, I should like to hope and think that the baseline approach opens that up, and now enterprises can use it. In fact, the way to think of this is, if we stop trying to make blockchains do everything, we can use them in almost everything. So certainly in B2B process automation, which is everything, right? Every company buys stuff from other companies. Every company needs to coordinate their activities with other companies. It's just the way the world works today. And from that perspective, there is a lot of work for a ordering and hash management service, which is the way I think of blockchains, to help make those things not go wrong. I mean, just down to simple things like if you have a bunch of purchase orders coming in all in a row, they need to come in all in a row because they're being calculated typically against a discount table, right? So if I order more than 100 units from you, you'll give me a discount. Well, if I have a 200 unit orders and they both come in at the same time, and my traditional system of record processes them at the same time, maybe two different people sitting at two different computers entering the same, these two different purchase orders at the same time, then one of them is not going to be getting the correct discount. Just that alone is a huge problem in revenue recognition. We're talking billions of dollars US in these kinds of issues. Non-repudiation, doing a trade and people in the counterparty saying, well, I didn't get the memo. I didn't do that trade. Or wait a minute, I thought it was, one less zero than you just quoted me. That sort of thing. Oh, I fat fingered that. Oops. These are, when I was at IBM, I remember we did a project with IBM Global Finance, and this is a public now, so I can talk about it. I don't remember the specific numbers, but it was like $100 million or more tied up in disputes at any given time. And it took like 40 or more days on average to resolve them. That's a lot of money. So just the non-repudiation issue alone might be $1 trillion problem. I haven't done the math on that, but it's got to be a big number. So boring. Does it make the headlines? Nope. But it's big. So hopefully Baseline will have a part to play in getting the enterprises really to go into the boring part of the business, right? The IT, CIO side where things just have to work. That would be good. Hector Centros asked, could you give an example of data shared among partners? Well, purchase orders is a good example of that. Shipping manifests is a good example of that. Invoices, and that's where things can get towards the DeFi side of things, I suppose, right? If I have a bunch of invoices and I need the money for those invoices, if I'm say a supplier of some kind of manufactured good, I spend all my money to manufacture order number one, and then they say thank you very much, and I ship it off to them, and they say thank you, and here's your invoice. Yes, we will pay you in 90 days this amount of money. But I need that money to make the next order because I need the cash. Because my suppliers aren't going to let me do 90 days. I'm on net 20 or 30 or maybe, cash on demand. So I need to be able to get, cash flow earlier than I'm going to get that check in 90 days. So I can factor that. If I'm a big, giant organization with a big, giant invoice, like if I'm Rio Tinto or BHP Billiton or something, I can do invoice financing with a pretty small number of people out there in the world who can write those kinds of checks. They're big because they're inefficient. It's just been an inefficient way of doing things. So if you could tokenize that and you say, okay, I've got a bunch of invoices and I can, as Centrifuge, a company called Centrifuge does today, and of course my company is also able to tokenize these sorts of things. So codify assets is a pretty useful tool in this. So you could say, well, I'm going to tokenize these invoices. I'm going to bundle them up and I'm going to sell them as a tranche. And anybody can come in and buy a slice of it. Well, now I've got a much more democratized market and smaller players can start to factor invoices in a much more efficient way. And everybody gets their cash flow. I kind of like that story. Has the timeline changed for earlier or later or for more activity and integrations within Baseline? Baseline seems to be accelerating all the time. I've lost control or track of all the different projects that are going on, all the conversations, and it just percolates. So something like the Coca-Cola thing just kind of pops up. I found out about it like maybe 3 hours before they released their press release. Things like that are popping up all the time. I've had 2 conversations this morning with big companies, really big companies that are either wanting to sponsor the project or want to get involved, bring in engineers, or are just doing something with their product with the baseline pattern. Again, I think what's nice about the baseline pattern is it's a pattern. Nobody is capitulating to some other product or platform or technology or some other way of thinking. It's the product, the platform is your product, it's your platform. This is just a standardized. It's the wall outlet. It's the way of saying, okay, we're all going to use a 2-prong wall outlet or a 3-prong wall outlet. We all need to basically do this integration layer more or less the same way. And let's make sure we have good standards about that so that anybody implementing it in any way that they would like always is able to interop with anybody else that is a baseline system. So I'd like to see now going forward, our press release that says Mongo is now baseline compliant and Neo4j baseline compatible. Oracle baseline, you can baseline with Oracle, baseline with SAP, baseline with Dynamics. And a lot of these things are happening even before the product groups of those big companies actually countenance them, because their system integrators are just simply baselining their systems without the product itself having those components. They're just adding it to them. So that's cool. Austin Anderson asks, in addition to BP, what other major players in various industries are interested in baseline? Well, gosh, the original crew of companies, the 14. You have obviously Microsoft, Ernst & Young. They're working with tons of companies. There is now a second of the big 4 have just decided to sponsor, but I'm not allowed to say which one yet. So I think that the accounting industry makes a lot of sense. Baselining makes a lot of sense for the accounting industry, right? Because if I can tell you, hey, run your counterparty transactions through these zero-knowledge circuits, and I can know that at least on those things, you are not playing shenanigans with me on the stuff that I'm auditing, and that's going to make my life easier. It's going to make me give you a less painful colonoscopy for your 10K or for your company's financial reporting. So auditors are going to love baselining, I think. And so, and it's not surprising that Ernst & Young led the way on that, and really was a big chunk of the original work on the subject. And also Karthik Solapuram from Ernst & Young was probably the second most prolific writer on the version 0.1 release that came out on Wednesday. So EY is still heavily involved, and I think for good reason. They also have a product called OpsChain, which is baseline native, which is a purchasing and procurement and workflow system for enterprises. And they basically just say, they've said to me, hey, if you're baselined, then we're interested in working with you. If you're not, we're not. In the last talk, they talked about blockchain in 2030. How can you make integrations more efficient for big companies, especially regarding politics? How will this affect the IT industry? So let me talk about the politics thing. The original thought behind enterprise blockchain was this statement. All of us have control, but none of us is in control of the system through which we're doing business. I wrote that line in 2015. And I was a little bit wrong, because saying, okay, let's all get into a blockchain consortium and then let's spend another year working out the governance, it just actually gums things up even worse. And I've been working on consortia and alliances for 30 years. So I did not work out well in terms of the blockchain as a way of reducing politics factor in the enterprise. I'm hopeful that the approach that the baseline technique uses is a little more lightweight. It's a little bit more like a work group in Slack. And so you can form chains of workflows pretty quickly and without a lot of gnashing of teeth. And you don't have to set up and work out the governance of the common frame of reference. It's just there because it's the mainnet. So you can argue about more detailed things like, what are the terms of this particular work step? this particular contract, this particular agreement. Concerns, Nano Shinonomi asks, I have a concern about the timelines proposed. What is the 20 or 30 year timeline for exactly? Wow. Is it for taking over the market 100%? I don't know about the market part. I'm sort of outside of that. I'm just in standards right now. And I have no idea about 20 or 30 years. I do know that, in the 10-year time frame, if we're successful, we won't be talking about blockchain. It'll just be part of the stack. More immediately in terms of timelines, I'll talk a little bit about roadmap. The most proximate things that we need to start working on with a baseline perspective are, interesting problems like scaling. Not so much scaling. We can do millions of transactions even on ETH1 a month, but yeah, we'll want to be able to do it on side chains and on layer 2. I've often wondered how much more we could do on Chainlink, how much more we can rely on the Chainlink side and the Unibright side of things to increase the scaling factor and still maintain that drumbeat from the mainnet. Boom, boom, boom. That ordering service. So there's work there. There's work on batching. There's work on rollups. And then there's interesting work, I think, on things like synthetic data, right? Again, one of the things about baselining is that you're not putting the data in a big honeypot. The downside of that is you're not putting the data in a big honeypot, right? That makes it really easy to do things like track and trace or figuring out where the bad radishes are in sort of a produce supply chain issue. The problem with that is that, of course, you're forcing people to put their internal data into a big honeypot. And I think as the bloom comes off the rose for blockchain, people are going to start to go, wait a minute, I didn't want to do that before, and I don't want to do it again. I don't want you having all my data. So how do you get to the bad radish without having everybody's data in a big pot? And the one answer may be synthetic data, where the Merkle tree starts to look a little bit like a synthetic data construct if you do it correctly, and maybe that way we can say, all right, well, I don't know anything about radishes here, but I can use this synthetic query to know which companies I need to go extract clear text data from in order to find where the bad radishes are. So it's an extra step. It's not as efficient, but right, I think Walmart claims that they can do a lookup of where all the bad radishes are in under 2 seconds. If they'd done it on Mongo, it would have been under 2 milliseconds. And if they did it this way, they might take 2 minutes. I think 2 minutes would be just fine. All right, I'm gonna. There's so many good questions here. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy them all out, and again, if you didn't get your question answered, and because there are so many, and I'm seeing the numbers here drop. I mean, it was like 500 for a second ago, or 450. I'll copy these out right now, and but also if you want to. If you want to get me offline on the Slack channel, just DM me on the baseline-protocol.org. Get on the inviter for Slack and get me there. I'd be happy to answer your questions. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day, and happy chain linking.